Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really fascinating period, 1952 to 1963.
Right. The sources we're using call it the American Zenith. It's this time when the U.S. just seemed dominant, like a colossus, as the text puts it.
But it's not that simple, is it? There's this huge contradiction right at the heart of it.
Exactly. You've got this incredible, widespread prosperity on one hand, confidence too, but simmering underneath, intense anxiety.
You mean like the Cold War, fear of communism?
That, definitely. Global peril was constant, and domestically, huge divisions. Think about the civil rights struggle just starting to, well, explode.
Okay, so our goal here is to unpack that duality, affluence and anxiety side by side. We'll track it chronologically, looking at the economy, the culture, Ike's presidency, the Cold War stuff, and of course the beginnings of the Civil Rights Revolution.
Let's dive in.
So this post-war economic boom, where did it come from? The sources point to massive military spending, right?
Yeah, and not just spending, but also huge public investment in research. That really drove innovation.
And technology was key. The transistor, invented back in '48. That seems like a pivotal moment.
Oh, absolutely pivotal. It kicked off the whole electronics revolution. Suddenly you could make things smaller, faster, computers especially.
Which brings us to IBM, Big Blue.
Right. They become the model for this new kind of high-tech company. It's really the dawn of the information age, as we call it now.
And this boom changed how people lived, physically. Lots of new houses being built.
A staggering number. The text says 1 out of every 4 homes standing in 1960 was built in the 50s, mostly out in the suburbs.
So people are moving out of cities, becoming homeowners.
Yeah, a huge shift from renting. The American dream, owning your own place.
And the workforce itself is changing shape, too. 1956 seems like a key year.
It really was. That's the year white-collar workers first outnumbered blue-collar workers, a major signal.
Meaning a move towards service jobs, away from manufacturing.
Exactly. Service and information economy taking over, which, interestingly, also meant organized labor started to decline. Its peak membership was right around 54.
Okay, but this creates a kind of strange situation for women, doesn't it? Because culturally, there's this push toward...
They call it domesticity.
Yeah.
Yeah, the perfect housewife image you see on TV shows like Leave It to Beaver, Stay at Home, Raise the Kids.
But economically...
Economically, women were actually flooding into the workforce, filling the majority of those millions of new clerical and service jobs created after 1950.
The pink-collar ghetto, the authors call it.
Right, so you have this clash between the ideal and the reality, and that tension, that feeling of being trapped despite working,
Yeah.
that directly fuels Betty Friedan.
The Feminine Mystique, 1963.
A landmark book. It really articulated that stifling boredom of suburban housewifery for many women and basically launched the modern feminist movement.
Meanwhile, everyone's buying stuff. Consumer culture is just booming.
Oh, yeah. Plastic credit cards appear. Diners Club, 1949. You get the first McDonald's. Disneyland opens in 55. It's all about consumption.
And the engine driving a lot of that, unifying everyone, was television.
Television's growth was unbelievable. From just 6 stations in 46 to over 400 by 56. By 1960, pretty much every home had one.
Wow. And its impact.
Massive. Advertising becomes huge. $10 billion a year spent on TV ads. It changed sports, with teams moving west and south.
Like the Dodgers and Giants moving to California in '58.
Exactly. Even religion adapted, with preachers like Billy Graham becoming TV stars. And politically, hugely powerful.
Nixon's checkers speech in '52.
The perfect example. He saved his spot on the ticket by going directly to the people on TV. Showed its power immediately.
But not everyone was thrilled with this conformist consumer society. There's pushback.
Definitely. You had critiques like David Reisman's The Lonely Crowd talking about conformity, or John Kenneth Galbraith's The Affluent Society.
Galbraith's point was private wealth next to public neglect.
Pretty much. Private opulence, public squalor. He argued we weren't investing enough in public goods while everyone bought new cars and TVs.
And musically, there was a rebellion too. Rock and roll.
Enter Elvis Presley. He brilliantly blends black rhythm and blues with white country and bluegrass. Creates this incredibly potent crossover music.
Music that appealed to both black and white audiences, especially young people.
Right. And it wasn't just the sound. There's a new commercialization of sexuality, too. Think Marilyn Monroe or Hugh Hefner launching Playboy in '53. A challenge to the squeaky clean image.
Okay, let's pivot to the politics. 1952, Dwight D. Eisenhower, Ike, gets elected. Big war hero appeal.
People liked Ike. He seemed like a calm hand after the turmoil of Korea and the ongoing Cold War anxieties. Beat Adlai Stevenson pretty handily.
And his domestic policy was called dynamic conservatism. What did that actually mean in practice?
Well, it sounds a bit contradictory, doesn't it? The idea was be liberal when it comes to people, but conservative with money and government power.
So he didn't try to dismantle the New Deal entirely.
No, he actually consolidated popular programs like Social Security. Made them permanent fixtures, really. But he also put the brakes on further expansion of government, a kind of middle way.
But there were some harsher policies, too, according to the text. Operation Wetback?
Yes, in 1954, a massive and pretty brutal roundup and deportation of undocumented Mexican immigrants. And also his administration pushed the Native American termination policy.
Trying to end tribal status?
Essentially, yes, trying to assimilate Native Americans by dissolving tribes as legal entities. It was highly controversial and eventually abandoned in 1961.
Probably the most visible thing from his administration today is the highways.
Oh, absolutely. The Federal Highway Act of 1956. Just enormous. $27 billion for 42,000 miles of interstate highways.
And the justification wasn't just about cars, was it?
No, it was explicitly sold as a national defense measure. Quick evacuation routes, military transport, that sort of thing. Vital in a Cold War context.
But it had huge side effects, spurring suburban growth, killing off passenger.
Definitely reshaped the American landscape and how people lived and traveled.
Okay, switching to foreign policy. Ike and his Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles, they had this new look strategy.
Right. The promise was to do more than just contain communism. They wanted to roll it back. And the tool for that was massive retaliation.
Which meant nukes.
Pretty much.
Oh.
Cut back on expensive conventional forces like the Army and Navy and rely instead on the Strategic Air Command super bombers ready to deliver nuclear weapons anywhere, anytime. More bang for the buck was the idea.
But did it work? The text mentions the Hungarian uprising in 1956.
Yeah, that really exposed the limits. When the Hungarians rose up against Soviet control, what could the U.S. do? Threaten nuclear war over Hungary.
Not really credible.
Exactly. The nuclear threat was too massive, too clumsy a weapon for that kind of crisis. So the U.S. couldn't intervene effectively. It showed the strategy's inflexibility.
The Middle East was also heating up. Iran in 53.
A big one. The CIA helps orchestrate a coup to overthrow the elected government and install the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Why? To protect Western access to Iranian oil.
A decision with very long-term consequences.
Indeed. And then Suez in 56. Egypt's leader, Nasser, nationalizes the Suez Canal.
And Britain and France, along with Israel, invade.
Right. But Eisenhower was furious. He refused to supply them with oil, basically forcing them to back down. It showed America's new power, especially over its old allies, and the critical importance of Middle East oil.
Which leads to OPEC being formed in 1960.
Directly. The oil-producing nations realized they needed to coordinate.
Then came a real shock to the American system. Sputnik, 1957.
Huge shock. The Soviets launched the first satellite. Americans suddenly felt vulnerable, behind in science and technology. Created a sense of crisis.
The response was immediate, though. Rocket fever.
Yeah, everyone got obsessed with space. NASA was created very quickly. And Congress passed the National Defense Education Act in 58.
Pouring money into schools for science and languages.
Exactly. A direct reaction to Sputnik trying to catch up.
Still, Ike's presidency ended on a slightly sour note internationally with the U-2 incident.
Right. May 1960, an American U-2 spy plane gets shot down over the Soviet Union. It was a major embarrassment and scuttled a planned summit meeting in Paris between Eisenhower and Khrushchev.
Okay. While all this Cold War drama is playing out globally, there's this massive unresolved issue right here at home, civil rights.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to remember the context. In 1950, two-thirds of Black Americans still lived in the South under the boot of Jim Crow segregation.
The sources describe it as a system of daily humiliation and often violence.
Yes. The example of Emmett Till, the 14-year-old boy lynched in Mississippi in 1955 for allegedly whistling at a white woman. His killers acquitted by an all-white jury. That became a galvanizing symbol.
And this wasn't just a domestic issue. It hurt America's image abroad.
Terribly. Soviet propaganda had a field day with American racism. Gunnar Myrdal's book called it An American Dilemma, this clash between American ideals and racial reality.
Some steps had been taken earlier. Truman desegregating the military in 48.
And the Supreme Court chipping away its segregation in higher education, like in the Sweat v. Painter case in 1950. But the real catalyst for the mass movement, comes in Montgomery, Alabama.
Rosa Parks, December 1955.
Her refusal to give up her seat sparks the Montgomery bus boycott, a year-long struggle. And it brings Martin Luther King Jr. to the forefront.
A young Baptist minister.
Yes, and he brings this philosophy of nonviolent resistance, inspired by Gandhi. It becomes the bedrock of the movement.
This puts the Supreme Court, led by Chief Justice Earl Warren, center stage.
And in May 1954, they deliver Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. Just monumental.
Overturning Plessy v. Ferguson, separate but equal is declared unconstitutional in public schools.
Right. The court orders desegregation with all deliberate speed, though that phrase deliberate speed would prove problematic.
Because the South dug in its heels, massive resistance.
Exactly. Southern states pass laws, sign manifestos like the Declaration of Constitutional Principles, pledged to resist. Some districts even close public schools rather than integrate, funding private segregation academies.
Which forced Eisenhower's hand in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957.
He had been reluctant, preferring gradual change. But when the governor used the National Guard to block 9 black students, the Little Rock Nine, from entering Central High, Ike had to act. He sent in federal troops to enforce the court order.
A major assertion of federal power.
Huge. And that same year, Congress passed the first Civil Rights Act since Reconstruction, though it was fairly weak, mostly focused on voting rights protection.
But the activism was also bubbling up from younger people, the sit-ins.
Started in Greensboro, North Carolina, February 1960. 4 black college students just sat down at a whites-only Woolworth's lunch counter and refused to leave.
And it spread like wildfire.
It did. This tactic of nonviolent direct action energized young people. And in April 1960, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, pronounced SNCC, was formed.
Guided by Ella Baker, focusing on grassroots organizing.
Yes, a real shift towards more confrontational, youth-led activism. They were impatient with the pace of change. This energy carries into the 1960 election. Enter John F. Kennedy, young, charismatic.
But his Catholicism was a big hurdle, wasn't it?
It was a significant issue. No Catholic had ever been president. He had to address it directly, reassure Protestant voters about the separation of church and state. But the real game changer might have been the televised debates against Richard Nixon.
The first presidential debates on TV.
Right. And image mattered hugely. Kennedy came across as cool, confident, vigorous. Nixon, who was recovering from an illness, looked pale, sweaty, uncomfortable under the lights.
So people who listened on the radio thought Nixon won, but TV viewers preferred Kennedy.
That's the common understanding, yeah.
Yeah.
Kennedy won, but it was incredibly close in the popular vote. Razor thin.
His administration was dubbed the New Frontier. Lots of youthful energy and idealism.
Definitely. You see it in things like the Peace Corps, sending young Americans abroad. And his famous inaugural address, "Ask not what your country can do for you." Inspiring stuff.
But legislatively, he struggled a bit at first.
He did. Many of his key domestic proposals, like medical care for the aged and federal aid to education, got bogged down in Congress. But one big commitment he made was the Apollo program.
The moonshot.
Right. Landing a man on the moon by the end of the decade. It was very much framed as catching up to and surpassing the Soviets after Sputnik, restoring American prestige.
Foreign policy, though, got very messy very quickly. The Bay of Pigs.
A disaster.
Yeah.
April 1961. It was a CIA-backed plan, inherited from Eisenhower, to use Cuban exiles to overthrow Fidel Castro. It failed miserably within days.
And the result.
It embarrassed Kennedy, pushed Castro even closer to the Soviet Union, and really set a negative tone early on.
Then just a few months later, the Berlin Wall goes up, August 61.
Another major crisis. The Soviets and East Germans built it literally overnight to stop the flow of refugees from East to West Berlin. It became this stark, physical symbol of the Iron Curtain and the Cold War, the Wall of Shame.
Which leads us to maybe the most dangerous moment of the entire Cold War. The Cuban Missile Crisis, October 1962.
Absolutely terrifying. U.S. spy planes discover Soviet nuclear missile sites under construction in Cuba. Missiles capable of hitting major U.S. cities within minutes, 90 miles off the Florida coast.
The world held its breath. Nuclear chicken, the text calls it.
Kennedy rejected calls for an immediate airstrike or invasion. Instead, he announced a naval quarantine, a blockade, really, of Cuba, demanding the Soviets remove the missiles.
And after 13 incredibly tense days...
Khrushchev blinked. He agreed to pull the missiles out. In return, the U.S. publicly promised not to invade Cuba. Secretly, the U.S. also agreed to remove some of its own aging missiles from Turkey later on.
A huge sigh of relief. Did it change anything long-term?
It did seem to sober both sides up. It led directly to installing a Moscow-Washington hotline for direct communication in crises, and the next year, a treaty banning atmospheric nuclear tests was signed.
But elsewhere, the U.S. was getting deeper into another conflict, Vietnam.
Yes, Kennedy rejected Dulles' massive retaliation idea in favor of flexible response, meaning having a range of options, including conventional forces and counterinsurgency.
Which meant sending more troops.
More military advisors, technically. But yes, the number of U.S. personnel in South Vietnam increased sharply under Kennedy, trying to prop up the shaky Diem regime against the Viet Cong insurgents.
And ironically, the U.S. ended up supporting a coup against Diem in '63.
Right. He proved corrupt and unpopular. But his overthrow led to even more political chaos in South Vietnam, deepening the U.S. entanglement.
Back home, the civil rights movement was forcing Kennedy's hand, too. He seemed reluctant at first.
He's cautious, yeah. Worried about alienating powerful Southern Democrats in Congress, whose votes he needed for other programs. But the sheer bravery and the violence faced by activists made inaction impossible.
Like the Freedom Riders in 1961, buses attacked, burned.
Exactly. Federal marshals had to be sent to protect them. Then the battle to integrate the University of Mississippi in '62 with James Meredith riots, deaths. Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General, even authorized wiretaps on MLK Jr., partly out of political concerns.
But Birmingham in '63 seems like the turning point for JFK.
Spring 1963. The images coming out of Birmingham were horrific. Police under Bull Connor using attack dogs, high-pressure fire hoses on peaceful protesters, many of them children. It shocked the nation and the world.
And Kennedy responded.
He went on national television in June 1963 and called civil rights a moral issue. He committed the power and prestige of his office to pushing for a strong new civil rights bill.
Which was followed by the March on Washington in August '63.
A massive, peaceful demonstration. 250,000 people. That's where King delivered his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech, a high point of hope.
But the violence didn't stop.
Tragically, no. Medgar Evers, a key NAACP organizer, was murdered in Mississippi just hours after Kennedy's speech in June. And then in September, a bomb killed 4 young black girls attending Sunday school at a church in Birmingham.
And then just 2 months later, November 22nd, 1963.
Kennedy himself was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested. Then Oswald himself was shot and killed by Jack Ruby just days later. A stunning, traumatic end to the new frontier.
His legacy's complex, cut short after just 1,000 days, but undeniably charismatic.
Yes, he inspired a generation, even if later revelations complicated the picture. The idealism was real for many.
Amidst all this Cold War tension and domestic strife, there was also a real flowering of American culture, New York taking over from Paris as the art world center.
Absolutely. You get abstract expressionism thing with Jackson Pollock and his action paintings, dripping paint onto canvas. Very energetic, very American in a way.
And then pop art comes along. Andy Warhol, Roy Lichtenstein.
Right. Taking everyday consumer items, soup cans, comic strips, and turning them into high art. A commentary on that very consumer culture we talked about earlier.
Architecture saw changes too. The sleek glass and steel international style becomes dominant for big buildings like the UN headquarters.
Though you also had unique sculptural designs like Frank Lloyd Wright's Guggenheim Museum, which opened in '59. A real contrast.
And literature. Was it just reflecting the conformity or pushing against it?
Pushing against it, often. You move beyond the standard realistic war novels. Joseph Heller's Catch-22 comes out of this era, a darkly satirical take on war and bureaucracy. But the most direct challenge to conformity came from the Beat generation.
The Beats. Kerouac, Ginsberg.
Yeah, this group of writers and poets in the '50s explicitly rejected middle-class materialism and suburban life. They celebrated spontaneity, nonconformity, road trips, jazz, sometimes drugs.
Kerouac's On the Road from '57 is the classic example.
Definitely. And Allen Ginsberg's poem Howl from '55 caused a huge stir, faced an obscenity trial which it won. Very influential for the counterculture that would emerge later in the '60s.
Even mainstream theater was critical. Arthur Miller.
Death of a Salesman back in '49 was already a powerful critique of the American dream of material success. And his play The Crucible in '53 used the Salem witch trials as an allegory for McCarthyism.
And plays and novels were tackling race more directly, too.
Yes. Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun about a black family's dreams and struggles was a huge hit in '59. And Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man from '52 offered this profound exploration of the black experience in America. Plus, J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye captures that sense of adolescent alienation. So looking back at this whole period, 1952 to '63, American Zenith feels right in terms of power and affluence, but it's just shot through with tension.
Constant tension. Global leadership clashing with Cold War brinkmanship like Cuba. Unprecedented prosperity alongside this deep, boiling struggle for civil rights.
It really sets the stage for the turbulent 60s that follow immediately after Kennedy's death.
So for you listening, what's the big takeaway here? We've walked through Ike's dynamic conservatism, Kennedy's new frontier, the massive economic and cultural shifts, but maybe the most important thread connecting it all goes back to Eisenhower.
You mean his farewell address?
Exactly. We talked about the highway system justified by defense, the shift to nuclear reliance for cost savings, the space race spending. It all feeds into that warning he gave as he left office in 1961.
About the military-industrial complex.
Right. He specifically warned against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by this combination of the armed forces and the massive defense industries. It's a really critical lens for understanding why the U.S. was spending so much and involved in so many global conflicts during this supposed zenith.
A powerful warning, and maybe one that wasn't fully heeded. It certainly resonates through the decades that followed.
A perfect place to leave off. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.